Today I'm going to be talking all about the recurve release. I'll give you 5 lessons from this video that you can take away to make sure your release is cleaner, it's closer to the neck, and it's more consistent. The release is one of the most talked about subjects in recurve archery, and these lessons are really important because they're going to change how you think about the release, how you train to improve your release, and then how you work on it in your training as well. So what I'm going to do, we'll get right into it. I want to show you what we're looking for in a release. And I also want to show you how it's possible to go from not such a good release to a good one. So this is myself in, not sure what year, maybe 2018. And this is a slow motion video, so it's really nice to see the release in slow motion. You want, on the release, the fingertips just to kind of slip away, so the string pushes the fingertips away. And then the hand basically stays unmoving, doesn't open up, doesn't come away from the face, stays close to the neck, and then you can see the fingernails just kind of grabbing the neck, staying close to the neck as the follow through happens, and then the hand comes backwards. So I'll show you that one more time. There's not a big opening of the hand, it's just the string kind of slips through the fingers, and then the hand goes back, a consistent, a well-directed follow through. Now this is a good example. The reason I wanted to show you this is if we also now look at this. This is a picture, so that was myself shooting, and this is a picture when I started shooting. You can tell that this release is not so good. So this has got the typical kind of hand away from the neck, waving. This is a terrible release, let's be honest. And you can also see it from this angle. I mean, look at that. That is an incredible release right there. So this is from when I started shooting. I wanted to show you that to give you hope that you can go from this to a cleaner release like I showed you in the video, and I've definitely got experience as to what made those changes. The first thing I want to start with is poundage. You must have a light enough poundage in order to be able to do the release properly. I've actually got a direct quote from Kim Woo-jin that he put in my members community. I'll talk about that later, but in his direct quote he said it's recommended to start with a low poundage and only gradually increase the poundage once you've correctly learnt the expansion and release movement. Start by practicing the expansion at a low poundage and without a target face, so your release hand follows through strongly enough away from the target. This is so important. There's 2 points to this. One is the hook, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But if your poundage is too high, you're going to have to grab the string with your hand with all your might to avoid the string slipping out your fingers. You're going to feel like if the poundage is too high for you, you're going to feel like you have to grab onto the string hard. And then when you're at full draw, the only way you can let go is by doing this. So if your poundage is too high, it's almost guaranteed your release is not going to be good because you're having to grab the string with your hooking fingers, essentially. So that's one part of it. High poundage makes you grab too much, maybe a too deep a hook, too strong a hook, too much tension in the hand, and that makes your release hard. The second point as well is what Kim Woo-jin said in that second part of the sentence. Remember what I just said? He said, so your release hand follows through strongly enough away from the target. If you've got, let's just say, a 50-pound bow, and the string is pulling you that way, 50 pounds, you're going to have a lot of pressure, a lot of pulling away from the target in order to get your follow through strong and have a well-directed follow through like this, i.e. strongly enough away from the target, like Kim Woo-jin said. So there's a reason that the best archer of all time that's a direct quote from Kim Woo-jin. There's a reason he said about that. So I want to start this video by saying about the poundage. To give you an analogy, people say, you might have often heard, you need to have a relaxed hand. Kind of like I was just saying, if there's too much tension in the hand, it's impossible to do a good release. You might have heard people say you need your draw hand to be relaxed and only to use your back and all those kind of things. Now let me ask you, if you go into a gym and try and pick up a 70 kilogram dumbbell with your drawing fingers in your same hook, do you think you're able to lift that dumbbell up? If you're just kind of hanging it is what I mean, hanging it like this, do you think you're able to do that with a relaxed hook if it's a 70 kilo dumbbell? Probably not. It's a very, very heavy dumbbell. If you do the same thing with a 15 kilogram dumbbell, chances are you're able to do that with a more relaxed hook. The point I want to make here is when people say your hook needs to be relaxed, it's all relative, and someone who is stronger is much more able to have a relaxed hook because it just seems easier for them They don't have to have all that tension. Whereas someone who is weaker, especially in grip strength and finger strength, they're going to struggle with that. So that's why I wanted to start with this, the low poundage, making sure the poundage is light enough, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on as well. So that's where I wanted to start this video. The second thing I wanted to, before we get into the how-tos and the drills and all these kind of technique things, the second thing I wanted to mention is you need to change how you think about the shot. So most people, they do all their preparation, they do all their shot, they come up here, they get to full draw, they work on all this set and setup, and this is all good, and their alignment and stuff like that. And then they get to the clicker clicking, and they get to the release, and they think, okay, I'm up here, click, and then I'm done. They think of the release as the end of the shot, which is kind of natural. That's kind of how most people end up learning it, and it's towards the end of what you would say the shot cycle. So people kind of give up on the shot at that point. They relax. And this is the massive problem. If you treat the release as the end of the shot, you're going to relax, you're going to collapse, and you're going to have this outward release. So what I want you to change while you're thinking about and while you're watching this video, think about the release as the beginning of the shot, not the end of the shot. This is a key difference, because if you do that, it's going to make sure that you follow through correctly. The same way as a runner would not run to 100 meters when they're sprinting. They would run past that line, because if they try and run to the 100 meters, they're going to slow down before it. That's just a really kind of simple but really important kind of mindset shift, if you like. So now let's get on to how you would actually work on this. Now, if I go back here and I'll get rid of this, I want to bring up that video I had before. So one of the most important things is learning the hook. As you can see in this video, the back of the hand here is quite nicely relaxed. There's not excess tension, and particularly if I get my brush here, particularly around the knuckles here, you can see, especially this bottom knuckle here on the ring finger, they're quite flat. There's not a massive bulging of the knuckles here, and the hook is quite relaxed. So this is what I was talking about before. The first thing that you need to do in order to get a good release, you have to have a good hook. Because if you have a hook where you're tense, and especially if there's kind of like an angle in the wrist here, you're going to have to open out like this. So what's the best way to learn a good hook? Ironically, what I'd suggest first of all is to learn your hook is to not put your fingers on the string, and to get and use a shot trainer. So the one I recommend is the Recurve Archery shot trainer. Too many archers are resistant to buying a shot trainer because they say it's too expensive. It's like £70 or £80 or something, but we'll happily spend £500 on a sight. Honestly, this is one of the best investments you can spend, is getting a shot trainer like this. It is going to pay for itself many, many, many times. So get a shot trainer, and what I would like you to do is draw by using the elbow sling and having your fingers not on the string. The point of this is it's teaching you to draw from here, from your elbow. When you can learn to draw from your elbow, you're not relying on your wrist and your hand tension and also your bicep tension to pull the bow, and having all this kind of arm involvement and tension in the hand. So the first thing in order to learn your hook is, what I would actually say, is to use the Form Master, to use the shot trainer when you're pulling back here, to use that to lead from the elbow, and even then to do some holds where you're holding at full draw, essentially just learning the position, learning to use your elbow to lead, and learning to use your scapula. So that's the first thing I would recommend. Because the other kind of direct quote, I didn't say it yet, but the other direct quote that I've got here from Kim Woo-jin is, if you put a lot of strength in your fingers, you can't get a good shot. Again, direct quote from Kim Woo-jin there. So what I want to talk about now for the hook is when you're learning this. There's a whole page on my website. I'll bring it up here so you can have a look. But on my website, by the way, if you haven't already, onlinearcheryacademy.com, pop your email address in here and you'll get a weekly email from me every Friday with 3 tips every week. People love this newsletter. I think it's approaching 7,000 subscribers now, or maybe just over even. But last week in particular, I had a load of emails, people that loved this newsletter because I gave some tips about learning and how you can basically test yourself in practice more so that when you go to a competition, you're more ready. Stuff like this, people love it, sign up there. But what I wanted to show you here is on the technique page, you can go to technique here and then go to set. And turns out I'm not connected to the internet, but go to that page and what you can see there is the kind of hooking technique. That's what I wanted to show you. So that's what I wanted to show you there. But on this, some key points here is don't worry about the exact percentage on each finger. I think a lot of archers get confused about this and they're like, oh, what percentage should it be on the middle finger, the ring finger, the index finger? Don't worry about that. You want it to feel like one unit, one complete hook. So in practice, what you want is to feel like all three fingers form one hook here. Whereas if you actually go to this position and, for example, if I now introduce a bit too much tension in my wrist, I'll come up to the camera so you can see this. But this is an example of a good hook where I'm going to get a nice release like this. If I start basically trying to think about the tension too much, and particularly if I kind of grab a bit too much with the fingers like this is going to be a lot harder to get a good release. You see there how I'm basically grabbing with the fingers more. I'm actually going a bit deeper on the hook, and that's going to make it harder. So learning the hook and having it basically just on the fingertips, so the string goes in the groove, just behind the groove on the middle finger, and then in the groove on the, just in front of the groove, sorry, on the ring finger. So basically the string there, that's what you want. You don't want it too deep, you don't want it deeper than that because that's going to make sure that you open the hand like this. And you don't want to grab too hard with the knuckles. This is really key. And the reason I mentioned about the shot trainer before is if we go back to this position now you've learned to pull from here. When you then go to get your bow, you hook onto the string, your hook is nice. Then you go to pull with your elbow. You will feel much more easily if you start grabbing, because now you've got the reference of, oh, this is what it feels like to lead with the elbow because I've learnt it with the shot trainer. And now you've got that reference, you can then catch it earlier and work on it and basically keep this back of the wrist and the hand more relaxed. So that's what I wanted to mention about the hook. There's more information on the hook on my website, like I mentioned, so I'd recommend going through there and reading that. But now I want to talk a little bit more about the kind of technique and the muscle memory. Before we do though, just want to come over to here. If you haven't already, you definitely need to have a look at my membership. I mentioned earlier, Kim Woo-jin has put some tips previously in my membership group, but not only do you get that, you unlock access to every technique guide and resource on my website, so every full technique guide. You get weekly video guidance from me and Q&As on technique, training, mindset. There's just, honestly, there's so much that you get from this membership. I wanted to make it an absolute no-brainer because I started Online Archery Academy because I couldn't get, when I was learning and when I was training, I couldn't get the access to the information that I wanted. I couldn't learn from top archers. I couldn't get, real technique advice directly from international archers. So I wanted to start Online Archery Academy with this mission in mind. And this is perhaps one of the things I'm most proud about because it's literally a no-brainer in terms of price, £2.99 a month, accessible to everyone. And you get access to people like Kim Woo-jin, Steve Weiler, Bryony Pittman. You get weekly Q&As from me. You can send your questions in for me to answer, and I'll do videos on them. There's weekly videos from me. You get access to all my drills and libraries of kind of bow training drills and technique drills and everything. So check that out if you haven't already. I don't know what you're doing with your archery if you haven't joined. But also, finally, have a look at my Online Archery Academy video courses. We've got I'm not connected to the internet, so it won't load the pictures, but we've got a beginner's course, an advanced course, and there's a discount code. I'll put a YouTube discount code in the description and the comments below as well. And like I've said before, there's a 100-day money-back guarantee for these courses, and literally only one person ever has asked for a refund. That's how many people love these courses. Pretty much everyone who's joined loves them, so check them out. What I want to go to now, though, is the drills. So this drill is one of my favorite ones. So if we go to here, you can see this little device will go up here. This arrow in the elbow device is one of the best things that you can do as a drill to learn the expansion and then the release. So the reason this is so good, so it's basically, as you can see here, there's a full guide on my website again, how to make this on the blog section. But essentially it's just a piece of arrow with some elastic in it, And then if we scroll down, I think you'll see it in action on the video here, but basically you just get this elastic, put it through the arrow, and then use these ties to basically put that together so you can wrap it around your elbow like this, and then the arrow goes in your elbow joint, simply goes in your elbow joint here. And what this does at full draw, it means that when you go to full draw, you can squeeze around with this elbow, and having that arrow in your elbow here basically makes it really apparent the squeeze as you're coming around, and it gives you something to kind of move against. It gives you a feeling, because a lot of the time in the expansion, it's hard to know what movement to do because there's nothing to feel. There's no kind of direct feedback unless you have a coach that's touching your elbow or something, but they can't do that all the time. So this is why this is such a good drill, because it encourages this elbow moving around the body, which is crucial. Now, to bring this into perspective, I want to show you my release from my left side, because I'm right-handed. This feels natural to me. I've learnt it, I've done it probably a million times, and this, I've learnt it all, feels very flexible enough to do this. But some of the drills, say for example this arrow in the elbow drill is great. These drills help you develop the flexibility you need. They help you develop the muscle memory you need. Ignore that Apple thing with the thumbs up, it does that. But essentially, I want to show you the left side, because on this side, what you'll see is, you can see it already, even though I know what the technique is, when I go to the left side, you'll see it's just awkward. You'll see the knuckles are out here, you'll see that my elbow's a bit high, you'll see that there's a bit of kind of like a kink here, and particularly when I now go to do this, it does not look fluid. I'm really struggling here to keep this close to the neck, and the reason is, one of the key things is the flexibility of this part of the arm, so the lower forearm and the upper arm, the flexibility to close that angle down like this is developed over time. So again, arrow in the elbow drill is great. One of the other things that you can do about this, or that you can do for this, sorry, is the follow through drill. So by getting to this point, I'd like you to essentially get your fingers on the neck here, like this, and basically all you're going to do is you're going to move your fingers back, keeping them scratching the neck whilst moving your elbow around the body, like this. So scratching the neck, elbow around the body, like this. And what this is doing, I'll do it again. As I do this, you can do this now as you're watching the video. As you do this, you will find that even with no bow, with no weight at all, as you do it correctly, you'll feel your draw scapula really squeezing towards your spine, even though there's no weight. And this is really crucial, because you're developing not only the muscle memory of the scapula squeezing towards the spine, similar to when you were using the shot trainer before, but also you're developing the memory of what to do with this elbow when you're coming around, and how to keep the fingers close to the neck. Because if you don't do this, if you don't work on the flexibility first, what's going to happen, if I really try and keep the release tight to the neck and I kind of try and force it, if I try and do this, so we'll go here, and I'm going to try and keep the release, I'm going to end up going like this. And what people end up doing is, because they're trying so hard to keep the fingers close to the neck, but they haven't developed the muscle memory of coming around in order to do that, they end up using their bicep to keep the fingers close to the neck, and they kind of snap the release. And that's going to basically, you get some twisting, and that's not going to be good for your shoulder. That is the way to, not guarantee, but that's the way to hurt your shoulder, essentially, because there's a lot of impulse, there's a lot of force in a very short amount of time, and that's not going to be great. So this is why you want to develop the flexibility, the movement, and the kind of muscle memory of it, because that's really key. The number of archers that have come to me and we maybe work on the release, or they've sent me a video of their release and that kind of thing, but then they think that the reason they can't do the release is because of just the poundage of the bow. That is part of it, like I mentioned at the start of the video. But then I'll get them to do the release with no bow, with a band, for example, or even without a band, like I've just been doing now, like this, just doing this, and they can't do a good release just with the fingers or just with the band. Ignore that thumbs up. I need to turn that feature off. Apple needs to turn that feature off, maybe. But if you can't do it without any band, without any bow, then you're never going to be able to do it with your normal weight bow. This is the thing, especially when it comes to the path. If you're expecting when you're practicing like this, if you can't get this path of the release really, really nice, just with empty hand like this, and then you're expecting to pick up your bow with full poundage at a target face in a competition under pressure and then have a good release, then you're just deluded. It's not going to happen, is it? So this is why you have to practice step by step, going through, okay, start with empty hand, nothing. Can I get the correct release with empty hands? So the next drill I want to show you with this, to kind of add every layer of the technique, is the fingers. If you were a member of my Online Archery Academy members group, that community that I was saying earlier, I actually put these tips in there. I think it was about a month ago or maybe 3 weeks ago. I put these release tips in there somewhere. So this one is going to help you learn the release of the fingers. And what I want you to do is basically you have this hooking here and you get both hands like this and you get the strong hook. And all you're going to do, you're going to keep your release hook the same and you're just going to slip off with your fingers on this hand. So you're going to come in here, pretend you're at full draw, and then I'm going to keep this hand the same. And all I did there was slip off with these fingers. And what this is showing you, I'm pulling quite hard here from the elbow and also from this elbow. And this is going to show you, okay, can I do this? Can I get that kind of release? That's a great way to start practicing the release there. That's a great drill to practice how, the kind of opening of the fingers. And then once you've learnt that by relaxing these fingers, you can then move on to it by maybe doing these fingers. So let's try again. So now I'm going to keep these fingers tight and relax these ones. So you can see the difference there, right? I'm just changing the drill slightly, still getting a good release, but kind of changing how I'm doing it in order to learn the technique. Once I've done that one, we've then got the one that I mentioned before with the follow through to get the second part, which is this here. And we've also got the arrow in the elbow drill that I showed you before. So there's a load of drills that you can do. And these are really, really important. But the key thing that I mentioned about the technique, if we go back to here, is you want this, just the fingertips is essentially what's going to release. And people say that, oh, you don't want to think about the hand at all and the fingers and that kind of thing. Okay, but when you look at it, that is what's happening. The fingertips, just the tips, are relaxing ever so slightly in order to let the release happen. But you want to do it in a way where basically if you keep the movement of the shot leading from the elbow, like I mentioned before, if you keep that and you don't open the whole hand, it's just the final tips of the fingers that relax, this is how you want to do it. And this is why this drill here, where you're just relaxing the tips of the fingers like this, that's why that is so good. So this is a really great drill for that. And what I want to show you now is, I want to kind of finish on one last thing. There's a couple more tips. So with that membership that I said as well, you also get access to the full version of my YouTube videos. This version today is going to be cut a little bit short. The full version is going to be in my Telegram community with the final kind of tips that I want to share with my members there, because this video is going to get a little bit too long. But what I want to show you here is kind of a final tip today on how it can be a little bit misleading. So what I mean by that is, if we go to this video here, so I said about earlier poundage and strength and that kind of thing. So I want to now show you this video, which is, again, this is of me shooting. This is after about maybe 2.5 years of not shooting. I think about 2 years. So come in, a little bit of shaking, and then eventually release. So why am I showing you this video? The reason I wanted to show you this is I'm clearly not as strong there as I was when I was training full time. That's clear. So if it was only a strength thing, then you would expect my release to be dramatically worse than it was when I was training full time. But that's not the case. The release is still okay there. It's not the best I've done, but it's still okay. So what does this mean? It means a large part of it is down to the feeling and the muscle memory and having learnt the technique, which is pretty clear, right? I think everyone would agree on that. The reason I wanted to show you this in particular is because you can kind of almost see that even though, if I zoom in a little bit more, even though I'm struggling a little bit, you can see maybe there's a little bit of wobbling, a little bit of shaking, I'm pulling quite hard to get that release strong, because I know that if I don't do that, it's going to go out and it's going to collapse. Because one of the key things that makes a bad release is this elbow there, when you release, collapsing forwards towards the target and basically making a soft shot. That's what we definitely want to avoid. So the final kind of thing I want to show you with this, and where I'm kind of leading with this, is it can be easy because we watch people, especially like Kim Woo-jin, who look so relaxed when they shoot. It can be easy to try and emulate that because you see them shoot and it looks almost just effortless. You know, it's a really quick draw, come up, and then hand looks really relaxed, and then the release is just like, just really soft and smooth and looks effortless. But most people, most archers would benefit, instead of trying to emulate that and trying to aim for that super soft and super smooth kind of shot, most archers would benefit from maybe looking a little bit more closely and trying to emulate an archer like Yoonmi Jin. And the reason I say this is if we watch Yoonmi Jin shoot, watch her release. Very aggressive. This shot here, I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. Comes in, pulls against the face, really strong, really strong, and then really aggressive release. So watching this, we'll carry on watching another shot. And then really strong release now. And then from the back view is really nice as well in the second, from this back view here. You can see elbow pulling, strong release. So the reason I wanted to show this is most people would benefit, rather than trying to emulate someone like Kim Woo-jin, who is obviously, you know, one of the best archers, probably the best archer to ever have lived. And everyone knows how much I like his technique. However, most people would benefit from trying to go a little bit more aggressive, particularly with leading from the elbow, particularly with how much they're pulling into the face, particularly with how much they're kind of trying to have a strong release. Most people would benefit from looking at someone like Yoonmi Jin, maybe Lee Woo-suk, something like that, to get a strong release rather than trying to make it so smooth and so clean. Because when you try and make it so smooth and so clean, it's very easy to end up being soft. Unless you've got 5 million arrows of practice like Kim Woo-jin has, it's going to be quite hard to get that same level of smoothness without compromising your release. So that's what I wanted to leave you with today. This kind of video of Yoonmi Jin where she's, actually this angle is really good as well. I just want to show you. So you can see here, this next angle comes in, you can see pull, and really strong release. I mean, look at that, that's really strong and punchy. Most people would benefit from doing something more like that because it's going to make sure they don't have that collapse that I was talking about. If you have this collapse on release, that's the end. That's the end of your grouping and the end of your consistent scoring. So this is what I wanted to leave you with today. So there's 5 lessons you can kind of take away from today. The first one is use the right poundage. Don't use too high a poundage. The second one is think of the release as the start of the shot, not the end of the shot. The third one is learn the hook properly, and there's sections on my website for that as well, but using it as one unit, having a relaxed back of the wrist, leading from the elbow, using a full master. The fourth thing is the technique and muscle memory that I mentioned with those drills that you can do. And finally, the fifth thing there is thinking of the release as a bit more aggressive and kind of breaking through the string, like that example with Yoonmi Jin I just shared. So that's it for today. If you haven't joined already, definitely join my community or look at my courses as well. And I'll see you in the next video.